Welcome back, everyone. Today's topic we're going to cover is texture. It is an element of interior design, and it's also very important, just like everything else we've been talking about. Really, all of the principles and elements of design are important, and layering those and putting those together is really important to create a cohesive and comfortable, inviting space and home. So today's texture is tactile texture. When you go in and look at flooring, a lot of times people will do this to the carpet because, we like to feel the texture of flooring and the countertops and cabinets and things like that. I think I'm very obsessive about feeling things, just because it is my job, and having the tactile sensation of different finishes is what this element of interior design is talking about. Side note, design tip here, when you're picking out carpeting, don't just feel it with your fingers, because unless you're walking on your hands, you need to feel it with your toes and your feet. So take the board out of the rack and put it on the floor and walk over it with your socks or your shoes or whatever it might be, because we don't walk on our fingers. Test it with your fingers, but walk on it with your feet. Okay, back to textiles and texture. Texture is really important because it's going to give your space depth and dimension. Depending on what type of texture it is, it can also set the mood of the space. So something that this isn't super soft and plushy, but if you can imagine a really plush, lovely rug, that's going to make that space feel really warm and cozy. Whereas if you have an old original brick wall from a really amazing old building, that can have a more rough and rustic industrial, again, it depends on a few things, but that is going to have a different feel because of the texture that's in the space. So this particular fabric is sort of velvety, and it has some texture to it. I also like to think of texture as something visual. So a few weeks ago we talked about monochromatic color schemes. In a monochromatic color scheme, I think we talked about having a lot of different texture, because having one color that's muted and having it all be super smooth is not going to be very interesting for your eye to look at. So for selections, it's really important to have different visual and tactile textures. So think of it that way, because those different textures visually is going to pull your eye around the room and make it more interesting to look at. So here's an example of something that's kind of a medium texture. Visually, there's a lot of texture to it. Tactilely, there's minimal. Now here's another fabric that has quite a bit of texture. It has sort of a linen weave here, and then it's got some embroidery with different yarns and strings, and it's really quite lovely. So this would be something that also doesn't have a lot of tactile texture, but there is quite a bit of visual texture, because there's different colors, there's different weaves and patterns within this fabric. Moving on to another. I did show you this already. So if you have ever gone into your kitchen or your friend's kitchen and just maybe it's me, if it's just me, let me know, but I always feel the countertop because it's so smooth and lovely. Now this particular Cambria piece happens to be smooth. There are also granites that you can get as a honed finish. I don't have any samples of those, but that would be where it is a little more rough. Now visually this has a lot of things going on, but if it's a honed piece, it will also feel a little bit rougher. It's still smooth, but there's going to be some bumps and some, hills and valleys to the countertop. So this would be a very smooth piece. Now all of these pieces go together. Imagine that. So all of these fabrics go with the carpet piece, goes with the Cambria, a wall color, a wall paint. The paint is a covering, but a wall can also be a tactile texture in the room. Think of a level 5 finish. It's very smooth. There is no texture at all. There's also hand trowel or different other textures that your walls can have. So the texture doesn't necessarily have to be the flooring or the fabric. It's all of the elements in the space. Now, within this set of, lovely finishes, here is a tile that is really great. You can kind of see it. It's got a little bit of a wave to it. So it has a hand-laid tile look. So if you look at it this way, you can see where there's some divots here. It's really, really great. So running your hand over it, you can feel it would be sort of like a honed granite stone, but you can feel the different textures within the tile. Now visually, it's really kind of hard to see, but as an entire wall, potentially, this would be really cool. You're going to see that it's not completely smooth. So the difference between the two here, lighting's not so great, but they are different. So within, and then I have this piece here. This is a piece of wood. It has more of a matte finish, so it's not like a polyurethane or a very thick, smooth finish. This has some graining to it. So visually, again, this has some going on. Tactilely, there's a little bit, you can feel the grain. So going back to all of these things that we have here, okay? So for this entire room of finishes, a really great way to bring in more texture is in lighting, because lighting is really, really important for illuminating the space, but then also adding that extra element of wow to your space. So for this particular room, a couple of options would be a linen shade chandelier. Now that could be a drum shade. It could be a chandelier that has several smaller. Now this is a pretty kind of coastal, but maybe a little bit casual. So nothing too wild and crazy as far as like, formality as far as the lighting goes. But another really great, I would probably put a rattan shade of some sort. It could be a drum shade. It could be like a bell shade. But something like that would add a lot of texture and a lot of interest. So these are a variety of textures that could be in one space that is going to bring depth and interest and visual appeal to the space. So when you're picking finishes, think of feeling them, but then also think of visually, how do you see that texture or that finish? So those are some really great tips on selections and finishes for the element that is texture. I will see you again next week. We'll talk about another principle or element of interior design. And in the meantime, if you have any questions, let me know. I am the red shoe wearing interior designer, Melissa Brunk from Timeless Designs, because there's no place like your home. We love to work on turnkey projects for busy professionals. We love to put all of the things together, coordinate it for you, and then you just get to go have fun, make memories, enjoy your space, and not have to worry about any of that stuff in between. So until next week, have a fantastic day and a fantastic week.